Well, praise the Lord, saints and friends. This is Elder Adrian Heyman, continuing one of a series of talks on the amendments to the Constitution. I've finished the first 10. Those are commonly known as the Bill of Rights, and those deal with essentially the rights of a particular person or citizens of this particular country. There are 17 more to go, and not all of them deal with individuals' rights, but they are pretty interesting to go through, so I might as well go through it. And of course, whatever I do, somehow I have to tie it in to where how the saint's supposed to react. In many of these cases, these are the base rights that people should have as citizens or as human beings, but that the saint should aspire to a higher calling. So we don't curse anyone just because we can do so under the law. We don't manipulate business transactions, although it may be acceptable under the law. And we don't force our religion on other people, even though some people may want to do it. We have to make sure that if we are proponents of our faith and our belief, that essentially it is a voluntary thing. Don't make anyone be saved, because God doesn't want people to force to be saved. Contrary to popular opinion and what people think, the Lord does not force people to be saved. Either you want to or you don't want to. Now, let's start off with the 11th Amendment. It's a pretty interesting one because as I was trying to study it, it talks about what you can do to a state. And what I mean by state, I don't mean the federal state or the United States. I mean like an individual state, like California or Virginia or Wyoming or Florida or any of the other states. But this is what it says. It says the judicial power of the United States should not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States, that means an individual state, by citizens of another state or by citizens or subject of any foreign state. In short, what it is supposed to do, at least by first glance, is that you cannot, as a person who lives in California, sue Virginia. And a Virginian cannot sue sue the state of Minnesota. And a person who lives in Minnesota cannot sue the state of Colorado, which would make sense because essentially it's only those who are involved in that state can actually, and who are involved in the laws and the ordinances of that state, they are the ones that have to be able to face that particular state. But you can't even put it in federal laws, not just in state law, but you can't even do it in federal law. And of course, any citizen of a foreign country, like someone from Japan cannot sue Washington. Someone from Canada cannot sue Louisiana, and so on and so on. They may have to sue the federal government, and then the federal government has to be able to make some ordinances or whatever, but it prevents people suing other states for things that they don't believe in. And I think one great example is this. We know about the law against abortion, that when it was up to the Supreme Court didn't necessarily banish abortions, but they said if you're going to have an abortion, let the states figure it out, so to speak. And so you have different states have different ordinances on abortion. Some that ban abortions are pretty total against it. Some say, well, you can't have an abortion after the 6th month. And some are, of course, more strict than that. Of course, there are those that some allow abortions at any time. Now, I want to make sure that, because some people get this mixed up, you cannot have an abortion after a baby's born. After a baby is born, if you kill that baby, it's murder. Period. And all law in every state understands that. So if someone comes to you and say, oh, so-and-so wants an abortion, wants to put abortions on people after they're born, no, you can't do that. Let's get that straight. The laws of abortion, whether you allow them or not, does not extend to those after the moment of birth. So, let's not get confused. Let's not get riled up by what people may say. Let's understand. And let's be reasonable about this. But the idea that different states have different laws about it means that a person from California cannot sue Texas because they don't allow abortions. If you're going to want to have an abortion, you better stay in California. Don't go to Texas. Really, and that's really the case of it. Now, there have been different challenges to that law. Because whether they are in federal court or they're in state court, there have been reversals from one set of Supreme Court justices to another, and they've gone back and forth. And one such thing is essentially the idea of the 14th Amendment, which essentially deals with voting. I believe it either deals with voting rights or giving citizenship to people of color. And that essentially cannot be debated. So a state may want to put restrictions on it, but it's a federal law. They can't do it. So if a state wishes to have that, a person from another state can challenge. Let's say a person in New York can challenge the state of Mississippi when it comes to the 14th Amendment. So the 11th Amendment is not absolute. So it does give way to things that may take place that have been ratified after the 11th Amendment. For instance, the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment essentially can be prosecuted by an individual against a person in another state. Now, again, the question becomes, what does that have to do with the saint of God? And as the day grows shorter and it's about to get dark, I better hurry and finish this. The saint of God has his or her own laws, so to speak. Or we obey what Jesus has said. We obey what the apostles who were appointed by Jesus has said. And therefore, if he says one thing, then no matter what state laws may go through, we live by that. Now, our job is not to sue each other. And except in extraordinary circumstances, we really shouldn't sue each other. Are there extraordinary circumstances? Of course there are. But we should try as hard as possible not to get to that point. But how we are in terms of suing a state, it is within your right, if something a state is doing is against, let's say, federal law, an individual in that state, including you, as a saint of God, you can sue a state. And let me make this clear. Although the Bible talks a lot, or Paul talks about suing our brothers and sisters, we're not to do that. It says nothing about suing someone outside the church. Now, that does not mean that we go off and start putting suits against people just because they're not saved. That's not the idea. That's the wrong purpose of it. But what we can do is that if there's a wrong that we feel has been committed against us, we as saints of God can sue the state if it involves the state. If it, let's say, our governor of California does something that infringes upon rights of us as citizens, then we have a right to sue the state of California for taking our rights or taking our property or whatever it happens to be. We can sue. But I could not sue the state of Mississippi. Neither should I have to. Because the things that happen in the state of Mississippi are not happening in California. Now, what about those civil rights people that went to Mississippi and yeah. But again, it dealt with the 14th Amendment. So that's why that's why people, civil rights leaders, could go against states like Florida and Alabama and so on. But again, and there are fights back and forth, but by and large, it just means simply this: that if you belong to another state, you cannot sue. If you belong to one state, you can't sue another state. Neither can someone in Great Britain sue a state. They may be able to sue the federal government, but they can't sue a state. So hopefully that clears something up. Maybe it's not something that you were thinking of. If not, then that's okay. We have 16 more amendments to go. Hopefully this helped you in some way. But I'm committed to finishing all 27 amendments. So if this doesn't float your boat, then we'll hit something else. Anyway, hopefully that was somewhat informative to you. May God bless you and may He keep you. And have a wonderful evening in the love of God. God bless.